a foster care support group that we started that meets in Apache Junction at the Little Prospectors Daycare, and it's a fun event, and we send out information about that. And we also have a website that has a lot of resources for foster parents, so places you can go get beds or clothes. And if anybody does know of a resource that's not on there, if you take a look at it, just email us and let us know, because we're trying to make it as comprehensive of a list as we can. So feel free to sign up on the list or not, but we do send out a lot of good information. So I'm going to sit though, because I was only standing, so I could hand that list over. So is it okay if I talk? You're not their normal trainer for this class, though, right?
I have been mostly, yes.
Is it okay if I explain about how the dependency process starts and works?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'll kind of take. This is Michelle. She works in my office, and she wants me to have videos, so please just ignore her. So the dependency process is how your case starts. It obviously starts with removal of the children, and then the first thing that they'll do is have a team planning meeting with the parents and any other important people in the children's lives that may be involved in the removal process. And they'll sit down and say, here are the allegations, how are we going to move forward? A lot of times the parents will do what's called a deny and submit. So they're denying what DCS is telling about them, but they're going to submit to a dependency, which really means, yeah, we did that, and we're just going to move forward. The other option is to object to the dependency, and then they will have a trial in front of the judge assigned to the case to determine whether or not the children are dependent, which means that they need to be taken into the state's care and have the state be their technical parent for whatever time period is necessary. The next step is basically the meat and potatoes of the dependency process. There are 3 possible case plans. The first is reunification, and most of the cases do start with reunification with the parents, and they offer them services, psychological evaluations, treatment, counseling, drug and alcohol abuse treatment, counseling, and testing. There's also what's called a concurrent case plan, which is reunification and at the same time severance and adoption. And then in some situations where it was just a bad situation, they will actually move straight to severance and adoption. So, but I would say probably about 90% of the cases start at reunification at the very beginning. So this portion of the case is really hard to tell how long it's going to take. We do have what's called baby court in Arizona now. So if there are kiddos under 3, they're going to try to move their case plan forward as quickly as possible, because there's a lot of psychological research for kiddos that say, you need to be in a bonded home, you need to be with one caregiver as your parent to move forward and make all of the connections in the brain that they need to, and be able to then form bonded and important relationships later on in life. So they can move those kids forward faster. The fastest case that I've ever done was a baby that was able to be adopted when she was 9 months old. She was removed from the hospital, and then her mother and the father was John Doe in that case, didn't participate in any services, and so they were able to move forward immediately after the 6 months and get her adopted. I've also had families where it's a kinship placement with older kids where they've been in the system for about 3 years before they're able to switch over to severance and adoption. The case manager as well as the attorneys assigned to the case, so everyone's going to get an attorney. The kid's attorney is called the guardian ad litem, and I highly recommend that you get their information and make sure that you stay in contact with them so that you can provide them with any updates that are necessary, because they are the advocate for the kiddos in front of the judge. So if there's a problem, they can stand up and say, hey, this isn't taking place and we need to get that corrected. There's also obviously the DCS caseworker, and then both parents will be assigned their own attorney if there is a father that's in the picture. Unfortunately, a lot of times there isn't, and so if they don't know who the father is, they always call that person John Doe. So it's just a fictional character, basically, and then they'll terminate his rights based upon publication, so they'll just publish it in the newspaper, and then at the time that they terminate the mom's rights, they'll also just put in the necessary testimony to terminate John Doe's rights as well. Also, sometimes if the kids are 12 or over, they will assign that child their own attorney as well. So the guardian ad litem is usually assigned to the full sibling set, but usually if there's like older kids that might have a differing opinion, they will get their own attorney. So if you have older kiddos, make sure you stay in contact with that attorney as well. One tip is for you to make sure that you put all of your communication with these folks in writing, because unfortunately, if it happened on the telephone, it didn't really happen. So you can have a telephone call, and that's great, and sometimes you really need to have a telephone call to get your point across, but then follow it up with an email, just saying, hey, I just want to remind you that we talked about making sure that you're going to make a referral to Arizona Children's for this specific type of counseling, or yes, we understand that this child needs occupational therapy for handwriting, and we're going to make sure that that gets put in place. So the case plan then goes, finally someone's going to file a petition for termination of parental rights. That portion of the case usually is done in, I would say 3 months, but sometimes the court's calendar is backed up, so it could take a little bit longer. But the nice thing is that the reason that you have to wait so long is because they need to make sure that they've given the parents all the opportunities and all the chances that they ever could have possibly needed in order to make sure that their case is solid. So they don't want to file a petition for termination and then actually have the court deny the request, because then it sets you back to step one. So you have to, you're waiting months and months and months again. So it might be really frustrating because sometimes they set court hearings out 6 months. So like, if they continue your case 3 times, that's 1.5 years. And so that's why they don't do that for little kiddos anymore, because that's such a long time. So if there are different problems, you can try to ask the DCS caseworker to say, would you mind asking for a hearing in 3 months instead of 6 months, so that we can come back sooner if you know that the parents aren't doing anything at all. So you, as the placement for the kiddos, you're entitled to go to every court hearing, you're entitled to notice of every court hearing, and you're entitled to get a copy of what's very professionally called the court report. I think they could come up with a better name, but no one asked me. So that's prepared by the DCS caseworker, and it's gives all the information about the kiddos, kind of what's going on in the case plan. And the first few times you go to court, it's more comprehensive. If the case plan's kind of dragging on, there's usually like a save as thing going on, and there's like 2 sentences at the bottom that's like, yep, still fine. Yep, kids are still alive, basically. We all know that caseworkers have a lot of kids on their plate, and there aren't enough caseworkers, and there's not enough time in the day. So give them a little bit of slack, but also make sure that you are keeping them up to what they need to do if your kiddos are falling, if you feel like they're falling through the cracks or they're not getting what they need. So, you kind of have to walk a fine line, because you certainly want to make sure that the caseworker is on your side. So I don't recommend picking fights with caseworkers. However, if there is a problem, then you need to make sure that it's addressed. But it's just a fine line, okay? Everyone's catching that? Okay. So once the termination is completed, that's when I would step in. So you're entitled to hire any attorney that you want to assist you in your adoption. There's people that might tell you that you have to use so-and-so, but you can actually choose anyone that you want. I obviously do that, so it would be cool if you picked me, but you don't have to. If you have a family friend or somebody, just make sure that you pick someone that does have experience in adoptions, because working with DCS and working with subsidy is really a niche. Not that many people do it, and it's important to make sure that that's done properly so that you get all of the subsidy that you need and that your adoption isn't delayed or reset, because there's a lot of things that I've had to learn over the last 6 years that aren't really written anywhere. You just sort of figure it out as you go along. And so just make sure you hire someone that does have experience. The adoption process, after you've gone through this whole maybe 2 years of dealing with the court and dealing with DCS, the adoption hearing takes 5 minutes. So I always like to make sure people are aware of that in the beginning, because sometimes it can be a little anticlimactic. But I always say, do you want me to ask you some more questions? I can make it longer. And everyone's like, no. Let's just get the judge to sign on the line. So most of the work is actually done by your adoption attorney through the paperwork process, confirming that the parents' rights were terminated, making sure that you have all the necessary information about the kiddos. Because if you're the foster parents, especially if you're a community foster parent, you might never see the birth certificate or the social security card or any of this other information. So through DCS or asking through vital records, we make sure that we get all of that information and it's submitted to the court. Also through the adoption process, you can change the kiddo's name, and they'll update you as the parent or parents if you're legally married and adopting together on the birth certificate all at the same time. So you don't have to do a name change later, it's all done at the exact same time. The judges also really get into the hearings because they handle a lot of crappy stuff. Unfortunately, most of the stuff that takes place in juvenile court is hard. So they want to see as many people as you want to bring. I've literally had to direct traffic into some of the smaller courtrooms in Mesa and be like, everyone file in. Like I think I've gotten like 30 people in there. It was like standing room only, but you can make it happen. So it's a fun process. So the time it takes to get your adoption hearing depends on how long the kiddos have been in your home. So most of my families that come to me through DCS are eligible for an adoption in 60 days because the kids have been living in their home for over 1 year. Usually it's only in like the special placements where it's less than the time period. So if they've been in your home for 6 months or they're under 6 months old, you can get a 90-day adoption. Everyone else is entitled to their adoption hearing in 6 months, but you can ask for an accelerated hearing. Your attorney just needs to file a separate motion, and DCS just needs to agree to do the accelerated motion. So I would say on average, most of my adoptions are done in the 60 to 90-day time period. Let's see. Social Security changed their rules this year, and now all families are eligible to request a new Social Security number. Previously, grandparents and were specifically prohibited from requesting a new Social Security number for kiddos that they adopted, which in my opinion, they're the ones that need it the absolute most because their kids are the kids have their information, so when that comes as an issue is tax time. Someone else has already tried to claim the kids before you get around to doing your taxes. So make sure that if you think that that's going to be a problem, Social Security doesn't consider only a middle name change as a formal name change. So if you think that there could be any issues with identity fraud, make sure you either change the first name or the last name of your kiddo to prevent that from happening. That way if they file their taxes, it'll get kicked back as being, I don't know actually, whatever their warning is, and it says you can't do that. Let's see, what else? Oh, subsidy. So there is also the possibility that you'll be eligible for adoption subsidy. So the kids have to be eligible on their own for subsidy. It doesn't really depend on the financial resources of the adoptive parents, although that does assist in having your subsidy approved. The subsidy is based on the fact that the kids you're adopting are special needs. So in this instance, it's really considered a term of art. So everyone kind of has their own idea in their head from their personal experiences of what a special needs kid looks like. In the terms of adoption subsidy, it's a child over 5, a child that may have been drug or alcohol exposed in the womb, a child whose family has a history of mental illness. If you adopt a sibling set, that could deem you as special needs. And there's a couple of other factors. So, and then obviously kids that do have developmental delays or physical delays. So those are the factors that get you into this subsidy pool. So there are different levels. Most of the time, my families really only get the base level, and it is becoming harder and harder for them to get subsidy approved. But if you have a good adoption caseworker, which most of the adoption caseworkers that I've worked with are really good, and they'll go to bat for you and make sure that your subsidy gets approved. There's also the medical insurance for the kiddos until they turn 18, and there's also a one-time fee for legal and court expenses. So at my office, my families that have subsidy approved don't have any out-of-pocket expenses. I provide the funds for a new birth certificate for each of the kiddos and for the certified copy of the final order of adoption that you get on the day of the adoption hearing. I've never had a family not approved for subsidy, although this week I did have the biggest battle ever, but my family got approved. So, yeah. Anything else that I missed?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Do you guys have
Pay
any
out of
questions?
pocket for the adoption.
No, you don't pay out of pocket for the adoption.
Okay.
So, some lawyers might, but in my office, subsidy pays about 30 days after the adoption. So I basically do all of the work and then I get paid after the adoption is completed. Yeah, so there's usually no out-of-pocket cost for the adoption.
Did you want to talk about hiring the GAL for the adoption attorney?
Sure. So the guardian ad litem is the kiddo's attorney. And there could be a potential conflict of interest if you hire that person to assist you in the adoption, because until the adoption is completed, DCS can actually still remove the kiddos from your home. And although that's pretty unusual, it could be a concern, because then how are they going to decide what's going to happen? Like, they've already committed to you, and you've made a really good relationship with them, and they're all lovely people, so,